I'm Sophia Taylor, 29, and I never expected to find my estranged family standing in my doorway with moving boxes after 5 years of silence. The same people who once told me, "You don't even have a family," were now attempting to claim my 4-bedroom house as their own. The inheritance from my grandmother that bought this place was apparently enough to make them reconsider our relationship. What they didn't know was that their betrayal had awakened something in me, a plan that would teach them the true meaning of family. Before I share my story, where are you watching from? Hit like and subscribe to join my journey of reclaiming what family really means. My childhood started relatively normal, despite the financial instability that often had us moving from apartment to apartment. Until I was 8, I remember feeling loved and secure with both my parents, Jessica and Thomas Taylor. We weren't wealthy, but there was laughter in our small rental homes, and I felt like I belonged. Everything changed when they divorced. The custody battle was brutal, with accusations flying from both sides. My mother Jessica struggled with alcohol, a problem that had been bubbling under the surface for years but exploded after the separation. The court eventually granted primary custody to my father Thomas, with my mother having weekend visits that became increasingly irregular as her drinking worsened. Within a year, my father married Diane, a woman with 2 children of her own, Ashley, who was 2 years older than me, and Ethan, who was my age. From day one, I was an outsider in what quickly became their family. Diane made it clear through subtle actions that I was a burden. My clothes were always second-hand while Ashley got new ones, my school activities were too expensive while Ethan's sports equipment was a necessary investment. Ashley took after her mother, treating me with thinly veiled contempt. She would accidentally destroy my homework, claim my belongings as her own, and tell her friends not to talk to me at school. Ethan wasn't cruel, just indifferent. He existed in his own world of video games and basketball, barely acknowledging my existence unless forced to interact during family meals. The only person who showed me genuine love was my grandmother Elizabeth, my father's mother. She lived about an hour away, and visits to her home became my sanctuary. She taught me to bake cookies, helped with my science projects, and most importantly, listened when I talked. In her small, tidy house filled with books and the scent of cinnamon, I felt valued. "You're special, Sophia," she would tell me, her hands gently braiding my hair. "Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." But those visits were limited to once a month, and the rest of the time, I navigated the cold reality of being the unwanted reminder of my father's previous marriage. My father himself grew increasingly distant, working longer hours and deferring all parenting decisions to Diane. When I would try to talk to him privately, he'd say, "Diane is your mother now, respect her rules," effectively abandoning his role as my protector. The defining moment came when I was 16. It was Ashley's 18th birthday, and Diane had organized a lavish party with extended family traveling from across the country to attend. I had spent weeks saving my babysitting money to buy Ashley a necklace, hoping this gesture might finally thaw the ice between us. The day before the party, I overheard Diane and Ashley talking in the kitchen. "Do we have to invite Sophia?" Ashley whined. "It's my birthday, and I don't want her awkward presence ruining everything." "I know, honey," Diane replied. "But your father would make a fuss if we excluded her entirely. Just ignore her during the party, and I'll make sure she's assigned to help in the kitchen most of the time." I stood frozen in the hallway, the small wrapped package suddenly heavy in my pocket. But what came next hurt even more. "I wish Dad had just left her with her alcoholic mother," Ashley continued. "She doesn't even fit in our family photos with that red hair. Everyone always asks who the random kid is." "Well," Diane said with a sigh, "she'll be 18 soon enough, and then she's not our problem anymore." I retreated to my room, tears streaming down my face. The next day, I approached my father as he was setting up chairs in the backyard. "Dad, can I talk to you about the party today?" I asked hesitantly. He barely looked up. "What about it?" "I'm busy, Sophia. I heard Diane and Ashley talking yesterday. They don't want me at the party." He straightened up, annoyance flashing across his face. "Were you eavesdropping again? We've talked about this." You need to respect people's privacy. But Dad, they were talking about me, saying I don't belong in the family. Look, he said, checking his watch. Ashley is under a lot of pressure with this party. If you try harder to fit in instead of always feeling sorry for yourself, things would be easier for everyone. I felt my throat tighten. So you agree with them? That I don't belong? I didn't say that. Stop putting words in my mouth. He ran a hand through his hair. Just help out today without causing drama. That's all we're asking. As predicted, I spent most of the party serving food and clearing plates while Ashley opened gifts surrounded by admiring relatives. When it came time for family photos, Diane called everyone to the backyard. I stood up from where I'd been scraping plates, ready to join. Oh, Sophia, Diane said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Would you mind taking the pictures instead? We need someone with a steady hand. I looked at my father, silently pleading for intervention, but he avoided my gaze, focusing on adjusting his tie. Actually, I said, surprising myself with my steady voice, I'd like to be in at least one family photo. The awkward silence that followed was broken by Ashley's laugh. Why? You don't even have a family. Not a real one, anyway. Your mom's a drunk who doesn't want you, and you're just living here until Dad's legally not responsible for you anymore. Instead of defending me, my father said, Ashley, that's enough. Sophia, just take the pictures, please. Don't make this difficult. That night, I called my grandmother in tears. She listened quietly as I poured out everything, then said, come stay with me this summer. We'll figure something out together. 2 years later, the day after my 18th birthday, I packed everything I owned into 3 suitcases and left without saying goodbye. My grandmother had helped me apply for scholarships, and I had been accepted to a state university with enough financial aid to cover most expenses. The only person I maintained contact with was my grandmother Elizabeth. She became my lifeline, sending care packages to my dorm, calling every Sunday, and believing in me when no one else did. College was a fresh start, but it came with its own challenges. My financial aid covered tuition and basic dorm housing, but little else. While other students ordered pizza at midnight and shopped for new clothes, I worked 3 part-time jobs, morning shifts at the campus coffee shop, evening tutoring, and weekend data entry for an insurance company. Between classes and work, I discovered my passion for coding. It started with a required computer science course that most students dreaded, but I found myself staying up late, fascinated by the logic and creativity involved in programming. The professor noticed my enthusiasm and suggested I switch my major from general business to computer science. You have a natural aptitude for this, he told me after I'd completed a project weeks ahead of schedule. This field needs more women with your drive. Learning to code became my obsession. I taught myself additional languages through free online resources, often coding until 3 a.m. before getting up for my coffee shop shift at 6. The lack of sleep was worth it. Each new skill I mastered felt like building armor against the vulnerability of my past. During my junior year, I landed an internship at a small tech startup. The pay was minimal, but the experience was invaluable. My supervisor, Natalie Chen, became the mentor I never knew I needed. A senior developer with 15 years of experience, she took me under her wing, challenging me with increasingly complex projects and defending my ideas in team meetings when others tried to talk over me. You're going to face twice the scrutiny because you're young and female, she told me bluntly. So you need to be twice as prepared and 3 times as confident. I see greatness in you, Sophia. Don't let anyone dim your light. While building my career foundation, I also found my chosen family. Lucas Ramirez, an architecture student I met in the library during finals week of freshman year, became my best friend. We bonded over our mutual love of science fiction and our complicated family histories. He had been raised by his grandparents after his parents' deportation when he was 12. Maria Diaz became my roommate sophomore year after a housing shuffle. A psychology major with a boisterous laugh and unwavering loyalty, she taught me it was okay to take up space, to have opinions, to say no. We shared a tiny apartment off campus, splitting rent and cooking meals together to save money. During my senior year internship at a mid-sized tech company, I met Daniel Park, a fellow intern with a quick wit and brilliant mind for solving coding problems. We pushed each other to excel, staying late to debug projects and celebrating each successful launch with cheap champagne on his apartment rooftop. These three people, Lucas, Maria, and Daniel, became the foundation of my support system. They attended my graduation when no family members did. My grandmother was recovering from hip surgery and couldn't travel. They helped me move into my first post-college apartment, a studio barely big enough for a bed and desk. They believed in me during job rejections and celebrated my eventual victories. After graduation, I worked for 3 different companies in 5 years, each move a strategic step up in responsibility and pay. I started as a junior developer at a financial technology company, moved to a project manager role at a healthcare software provider, and finally landed a senior developer position at Technova, a prestigious firm known for innovative solutions and competitive benefits. By 27, I had saved enough for a down payment on a small 1-bedroom apartment. The day I got my keys, I stood in the empty space, running my hands along the walls that were mine. I called my grandmother immediately. "I did it, Grandma," I said, my voice echoing in the unfurnished room. "I bought my own place." "I never doubted you would, my dear," she replied, pride evident in her voice despite the increasing frailty I'd noticed during my last visit. "You've always been a builder, of solutions, of your life, of your own family of friends." 3 months later, I received the call that would change everything. My grandmother had collapsed and been diagnosed with late-stage pancreatic cancer. The prognosis was grim, 3 to 6 months. I took immediate leave from work and temporarily moved into her house to care for her. Those months were both heartbreaking and precious. Between managing her medications and cooking meals she rarely had the appetite to eat, we had conversations that went deeper than ever before. "I want to tell you why I've always had a special place in my heart for you," she said one evening as we sat on her porch swing. "You remind me of myself at your age, determined, resourceful, kind despite having reasons not to be." She told me stories I'd never heard, her own difficult relationship with her in-laws, her struggle to be taken seriously in her career as one of few female accountants in her firm in the 1970s, her quiet efforts to set aside money for my future when she saw how my father's household treated me. "I should have done more," she whispered one night, her hand fragilely holding mine. "I should have fought harder to get you away from them." "You did enough," I assured her. "You gave me somewhere safe to land, someone who believed in me." That made all the difference. When she passed, it was peaceful. She simply didn't wake up one morning, her favorite book still open on the nightstand. I felt her absence like a physical pain, a hollowness that nothing seemed to fill. The surprise came 2 weeks later during the reading of her will. While I'd expected perhaps a few sentimental items, my grandmother had left me the bulk of her estate, her house, savings, and family heirloom jewelry that had belonged to her mother and grandmother. To my granddaughter Sophia Taylor, the lawyer read, who has shown remarkable resilience and kindness despite difficult circumstances, "I leave my primary residence, all associated furnishings, my savings and investment accounts, and the family jewelry collection. You were the daughter of my heart, and everything I have is yours to build the future you deserve." The sum was substantial. My grandmother had lived modestly but invested wisely over decades. After selling her house, paying estate taxes, and settling all affairs, I found myself with enough money to purchase a beautiful 4-bedroom home in a desirable neighborhood, with funds remaining to establish a comfortable emergency fund. The house I chose was nothing like the showplace my stepmother had always coveted. Instead, it was a charming craftsman with character, original woodwork, a spacious kitchen for hosting friends, and enough bedrooms that I could have a dedicated office and still offer guest rooms when Lucas, Maria, or Daniel needed a place to stay. The inheritance accelerated my timeline, but I had been on the path to success through my own determination and hard work. The senior developer position I'd earned came with stock options that were already growing in value. My side consulting business was gaining respected clients. The house was partly a gift from my grandmother, but I had built the life that allowed me to maintain and deserve it. As I unpacked boxes in my new home, placing my grandmother's books on built-in shelves and hanging her quilts on walls, I felt her presence like a gentle hand on my shoulder. I had made it. Despite everything, I had built a life to be proud of, surrounded by people who chose to love me. Little did I know that my success would attract unwanted attention from the very people who had once declared I didn't even have a family. 6 months after moving into my new house, as I was settling into a comfortable routine of work and hosting small gatherings with friends, the first unexpected contact arrived. It was a casual Facebook message from Ashley, my stepsister. We weren't connected on social media. I had deliberately avoided adding any of my former family members, so the message sat in my request folder for 3 days before I noticed it. Hey Sophia. Long time no talk. I saw pics of your new place online, mutual friends I guess? And it looks amazing. We should catch up sometime. Life's too short for old grudges, right? Hugs and kisses. I stared at the message for a long time, my finger hovering over the delete button. It had been 5 years since I'd spoken to anyone in that family except for a brief, painful call to my father after my grandmother's passing, which had consisted mainly of logistics about the funeral he didn't attend. Before I could decide how to respond, life threw another surprise my way. While grocery shopping that weekend, I literally bumped carts with my father Thomas in the produce section. Sophia, he said, looking older than I remembered, new lines around his eyes and gray at his temples. What a coincidence. Dad, I replied, the word feeling foreign on my tongue. I didn't know you shopped here. We moved to this area a few months ago, he said, shifting uncomfortably. Diane got a job at the school district office. How have you been? I heard about Mom's passing. I'm sorry I couldn't make the funeral. The conversation was stilted, full of awkward pauses and surface-level information exchange. When he suggested getting coffee sometime, I found myself nodding despite the warning bells in my head. That night, I called Lucas to process what had happened. It's weird timing, he said cautiously. After 5 years of radio silence, suddenly your stepsister is sliding into your DMs and your dad just happens to shop at your grocery store? They did say they moved to the area, I defended, though I wasn't sure why I felt the need to. Maybe they don't know I live here too. Lucas replied, unconvinced. Just be careful, sophomore. You've built something good. Don't let them mess with your peace if their intentions aren't genuine. Despite my reservations, curiosity, and a small, persistent hope for reconciliation led me to agree to a family dinner at a neutral restaurant. The initial meeting was awkward but civilized. My father seemed genuinely interested in my career, asking questions about my company and projects. Diane complimented my outfit and asked about my friends. Ashley showed photos of her recent vacation and her boyfriend. Ethan, now working as a physical trainer, was the quietest, offering small smiles but little conversation. Over the next few weeks, these meetups continued, casual lunches, coffee dates, even a movie night. Each time, they were carefully pleasant, though something about their interest felt performative, especially when Diane would press for details about my house. 4 bedrooms for just one person, she commented during one lunch. That must feel so empty. Actually, I love the space, I replied. I have a home office, a guest room for friends, and I'm setting up the 4th bedroom as a crafting space. Such a waste, she murmured, before quickly adding, I just mean, it must get lonely. My father mentioned during another meeting that he'd been laid off from his management position due to company restructuring. The job market's tough at my age, he sighed. And with the mortgage underwater since the housing market shifted, we're in a bit of a tight spot. Diane was quick to change the subject, but I noticed the flash of annoyance she directed at my father. During the first visit they made to my home, for a dinner I hosted, I caught Diane running her hands over my furniture, checking brand labels when she thought I wasn't looking. Ashley spent an unusual amount of time asking about my security system and where I kept spare keys. Ethan wandered around opening closet doors until I gently asked him to stop. This guest room is perfect, he commented, lingering in the doorway. If anyone needed a place to crash for a while. After they left, I noticed something odd. My grandmother's jewelry box had been moved from my dresser to my bedside table, and several pieces seemed to be in different positions than I remembered. A quick inventory confirmed my suspicion: a valuable sapphire ring was missing. I told myself I must have misplaced it, perhaps while cleaning. But the uneasy feeling persisted, especially when Ashley called the next day asking if she could borrow my grandmother's pearl necklace for a job interview. "It would be like having a piece of family history with me for luck," she said sweetly. I made an excuse about not being able to find it, and her tone immediately cooled. 2 weeks later, Maria came over to help me organize my home office. As we sorted through papers, I mentioned the increasing frequency of my family's visits and their growing interest in my house. "I don't want to be that friend," Maria said carefully, "but don't you think it's strange that they showed up right after you bought this place? Did they even know about your grandmother's inheritance?" "I guess my father must have," I said slowly. "He was notified about the will, even though he didn't contest it. And now he's conveniently lost his job and has mortgage problems?" Maria raised an eyebrow. "While your stepmother is suddenly your biggest fan?" Red flags, amiga. Big, waving red flags. I wanted to dismiss her concerns, but they aligned too neatly with my own growing suspicions. The final piece fell into place later that week when I returned home unexpectedly early from work and overheard Ashley and Diane talking on my back porch, unaware of my presence. "The timing couldn't be more perfect," Diane was saying. "With the eviction notice and Thomas's unemployment benefits running out next month, we needed a solution fast." "I still don't see why we have to be so nice to her," Ashley replied. "Wouldn't it be easier to just ask directly? Or tell her about Dad's situation and make her feel guilty?" "Because she'd say no," Diane snapped. "You don't understand how these things work. We need to make her feel like she's part of the family again, like she owes us. Your father's working on her sympathy, I'm handling the practical angles, and you need to stop complaining and play your part." I retreated silently, my heart pounding. Their voices continued, unaware of my presence, as I slipped back out the front door and drove around the block, trying to process what I'd heard. They weren't interested in reconciliation. They wanted my house, my resources, my success. The family that had once told me I didn't belong now wanted to belong to me, or rather, to what I had. That night, I decided to be more cautious, to watch and wait rather than confront them immediately. I wanted to understand the full extent of their plan before making my next move. But I also couldn't deny the small, hurt part of me that still wanted to believe there was some genuine affection beneath their obvious scheme. The following week, I was scheduled to attend a 3-day technology conference in Seattle. I had mentioned this trip to my family during our last dinner together, explaining I'd be presenting a workshop on innovative coding solutions. "That's wonderful, honey," my father had said, with what seemed like genuine pride. "You always were the smart one." Diane had asked detailed questions about my travel dates, which I'd answered without suspicion. Ashley had even offered to house sit for me, an offer I politely declined, explaining my security system and friends checking in would be sufficient. The conference was going well, my presentation had been received enthusiastically, and I'd made valuable industry connections. But midway through the second day, I received an urgent text from Maria. "Call me ASAP. Something weird happening at your house." I stepped out of a session and called her immediately. "I drove by to water your plants like you asked," Maria said, her voice tense. "There's a moving truck in your driveway, and I saw your father carrying furniture inside." "A lot of furniture." My stomach dropped. "Are you sure it's not a delivery?" "I ordered a new desk chair." "Sophia, they're moving in boxes labeled kitchen and Ashley's room. This isn't a delivery." I caught the next flight home, canceling my final day at the conference. During the journey, my mind raced through possibilities, each more disturbing than the last. Had they misunderstood an offer I'd made? Had my father fabricated some sort of agreement? Or were they simply taking advantage of my absence to create a situation that would be difficult to undo? When my rideshare pulled up to my house late that evening, the moving truck was gone, but an unfamiliar sedan sat in my driveway alongside my father's car. Lights blazed from windows that should have been dark in an empty house. I used my key to open my own front door and stood frozen at the threshold. The living room had been rearranged. My modern sectional sofa had been pushed against a wall to make room for an oversized leather recliner I'd never seen before. Boxes were stacked along the dining room wall. The scent of unfamiliar cooking lingered in the air. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaking despite my attempt to sound authoritative. Diane appeared from the kitchen, wearing an apron as if she belonged there. "Sophia. You're back early. We thought you'd be gone another day. What's happening here?" I demanded, gesturing at the changed room. "Why are there moving boxes in my house?" "Oh," she said with a dismissive wave. "Don't worry about all this. We're just getting settled. Thomas. Sophia's home early." My father emerged from down the hallway, looking surprisingly guilty. "Sophia, we can explain. It's just temporary, until we get back on our feet." "Back on your feet?" I repeated, my voice rising. "In my house? Without asking me?" "We did try to discuss it," Diane said smoothly. "Remember when we talked about family supporting each other? You have all this extra space, and with our situation being so dire. I never agreed to you moving in." I exclaimed, my shock turning to anger. "How did you even get in?" "You gave your father a spare key last month," Diane replied. "For emergencies, remember?" I did remember. I'd given him a key when he'd offered to let in a repair person while I was at work. A momentary trust one was now deeply regretting. "Where's Ashley and Ethan?" I asked, noticing movement in my craft room down the hall. "We're in here," Ashley called. "Just arranging my vanity. This room has the best natural light." I strode down the hallway to find Ashley and Ethan in what had been my dedicated craft space. The room was now unrecognizable, my supplies stacked haphazardly in a corner, Ashley's bedroom furniture arranged throughout, and clothing already hanging in my closet. "What are you doing?" I whispered, shock making it hard to form words. "This is my house. You can't just move in without my permission." "We're not just moving in," Ethan said, looking uncomfortable. We've already moved in. While you were away." "It was Dad's idea," Ashley added quickly. "He said you'd be fine with it once you saw how well it could work. We're family, after all." I returned to the living room, where my father and Diane stood with matching expressions of defiant expectation. "You need to leave," I said firmly. "All of you. Right now." "Don't be dramatic, Sophia," Diane said. "We've already given notice on our rental. We have nowhere else to go." "That's not my problem," I replied. "You can't just invade someone's house and expect to stay." "We're not invading," my father said. "We're just helping family. And look, we've been improving things." He gestured to a new arrangement of photos on my mantel. My personal photos had been replaced with their family portraits, including ones where I'd been excluded years ago. As I moved through the house in growing horror, I discovered more changes: mail addressed to them on my counter, utility bills with their names added, my grandmother's quilt removed from my bed and replaced with their bedding. In the master bathroom, I found Diane's toiletries arranged neatly where mine had been. When I opened the drawer to find my own things, I discovered the jewelry box I kept there, now empty. "Where's my grandmother's jewelry?" I demanded, marching back to the living room. "Oh, I put that somewhere safe," Diane said vaguely. "This neighborhood can be dangerous, you know." "I want it back. Now." "Don't be selfish, Sophia," my father interjected. "Your grandmother would have wanted the family to enjoy those pieces. Ashley's been borrowing the pearl necklace for job interviews." Something about his tone, the entitlement, the assumption, snapped the last thread of my patience. "This is theft," I said, my voice cold and clear. "You've stolen my property and broken into my home." We didn't break in, Ashley said, entering the room with a toss of her hair. Dad has a key. And anyway, we need somewhere to live since we lost the house. Lost the house? I repeated. My father sighed heavily. We're being evicted from our rental, and the mortgage on our previous house was foreclosed last year. We've had a run of bad luck, and we need family support right now. Family? I laughed bitterly. You told me I didn't even have a family. You excluded me, belittled me, and abandoned me. And now you think you can just move into my house because it's convenient for you? You're being dramatic, Diane said dismissively. That was years ago, and you're clearly doing fine. Better than fine. You owe us, Sophia. You'd be nothing without this family. I'm nothing because of this family, I corrected. Everything I have, I built myself or received from the one person who actually cared about me, Grandma Elizabeth. Well, she should have considered the whole family in her will, not just you, Diane snapped, her pleasant facade cracking. It wasn't fair to cut everyone else out. I'm calling the police if you don't leave right now, I said, pulling out my phone. Go ahead, Ashley challenged. We'll tell them we had a verbal agreement to move in. It'll be your word against ours. And we have evidence, Dad's key, our mail already coming here, the fact that we've been having family dinners for weeks. I felt trapped, the walls of my own home suddenly closing in around me. You don't even have a real family, Diane said, echoing words that had wounded me years before. Who's going to believe you over us? We're a proper family unit. You're just a bitter young woman who can't let go of the past. I stood there, paralyzed by the familiar manipulation, the way they twisted reality to make me the villain. For a moment, I was 16 again, being told I didn't belong in the family photo. Fine, I said finally. You can stay tonight because it's late. But I want you out of my house by tomorrow afternoon. We'll discuss this more in the morning, my father said in the placating tone he'd always used when siding with Diane against me. You'll see this makes sense for everyone. And we'll be bringing the rest of our furniture tomorrow, Ashley added with a smirk. The movers are coming at 10. I retreated to my bedroom, which thankfully they hadn't fully taken over yet, and locked the door behind me. My hand shook as I texted Lucas, emergency. Family invaded my house while I was away. They're refusing to leave. Then I locked myself in the bathroom, slid down against the door, and finally allowed the tears to come. The betrayal was complete. They had never wanted to reconcile, they had only wanted what I had built. I spent that night oscillating between panic attacks and moments of numb disbelief. From behind my locked bedroom door, I could hear them moving around my house, their voices and footsteps a surreal reminder that my sanctuary had been invaded. Around midnight, my phone lit up with a text from Lucas, parked outside. Let me in. I crept downstairs, careful not to wake anyone, and opened the front door to find Lucas holding a bag of takeout and wearing an expression of fierce determination. I figured you hadn't eaten, he whispered as I let him in. And there was no way I was leaving you alone tonight. We tiptoed back to my room, where I finally managed to eat something while giving him the full account of what had happened. His presence was grounding, his outrage on my behalf validating the violation I felt. They can't do this, he said firmly. It's breaking and entering, even with a key if you didn't give permission. It's theft if they've taken your jewelry. We're getting you out of this. He insisted on sleeping on the floor beside my bed, a protective gesture that reminded me I wasn't alone against them anymore. For the first time since discovering the invasion, I managed a few hours of fitful sleep. Morning brought new determination. Lucas left briefly to pick up Maria, and they returned with breakfast and reinforcements. Daniel had come too, carrying his laptop and a look of focused anger. Family Emergency Response Team, reporting for duty, Maria announced, setting up breakfast on my bedroom floor like we were having a picnic. First step, you eat. Then we plan. As we ate, I felt the emotional fog lifting. The presence of my chosen family, people who had proven their loyalty and love over years, strengthened my resolve. I think I've been having a trauma response, I admitted. When they started using the same manipulative language they always used, I just froze. Reverted to that scared teenager who had no power. That's completely normal, Maria said gently. Emotional abuse creates deep patterns. But you're not that teenager anymore, Sophia. You're a successful, independent woman with resources and support. And we're not letting them gaslight you, Daniel added. I've already started documenting everything. Timestamped photos of the changes they've made to your house, screenshots of text messages about the conference that prove they knew you'd be away. While they were strategic, I was also experiencing emotional flashbacks to my childhood, moments when I'd been made to feel unwelcome in my own home, when my boundaries had been ignored, when my existence had been treated as an inconvenience. You know what stands out to me? I said, a realization dawning. They never once asked how I felt about the conference, or showed any interest in my presentation. Even now, when they're literally in my house, they don't actually care about me or my life. They just want what I have. Lucas nodded. That's the difference between real family and blood relations. Real family celebrates your victories. These people just want to benefit from them. As we formulated a plan, I remembered something. Wait, Ashley was using an iPad yesterday. She left it on the coffee table. It might have evidence of their planning. Daniel volunteered to retrieve it, sneaking downstairs while the others were occupied with breakfast in the kitchen. He returned triumphant, iPad in hand. It wasn't even locked, he whispered. What we found confirmed our worst suspicions. Weeks of text messages between Ashley, Diane, and my father, detailing their financial troubles and explicitly planning to move in with me without asking. They had been strategic about reconnecting, timing their reappearance in my life to coincide with their eviction notice. Look at this, Maria pointed to a message from Diane to Ashley, don't mention the eviction yet. We need to establish regular contact first, make her feel obligated. Your father thinks she'll feel too guilty to refuse once we're actually in the house. Another message from my father read, the mortgage company is moving forward with collections. We need to be out by the end of the month. Sophia's house is the perfect solution, 4 bedrooms, good neighborhood, and she's alone. No reason she needs all that space. Most damning was a group chat where they discussed logistics, move the big items while she's at that conference. Once our stuff is there, it's harder for her to kick us out. I've been researching tenant rights. If we can establish residency, she'd have to formally evict us, which takes months. I felt sick but also strangely vindicated. It hadn't been my imagination or paranoia, they had deliberately planned to take advantage of me. Further searching revealed they'd been telling extended family and friends they were co-owners of my house, describing it as a family investment property. They had significant debt beyond the mortgage, credit cards, personal loans, even tax liens. No wonder they were so desperate to move in, Daniel said. They're financially underwater. And look at this email confirmation, Lucas pointed out. They've already given notice on their rental and paid the fee to break their lease early. They literally have nowhere else to go right now. The more we discovered, the clearer the situation became. This wasn't an impulsive decision or a misunderstanding, it was a calculated plan to exploit me. My family had seen me as a solution to their problems, not as a person with feelings and boundaries. Maria, with her psychology background, helped me understand the manipulation techniques they'd employed. The love bombing during our initial reunions, the strategic sharing of their problems to create sympathy, the guilt-inducing language, and finally the bold move designed to present me with a fait accompli. Classic abusers, she concluded. They're trying to make you responsible for their well-being while ignoring your boundaries completely. Lucas, whose work in architecture had given him connections in real estate, called a friend who specialized in property law. After explaining the situation, he put the call on speaker. Your friend needs a lawyer immediately, the real estate attorney advised. In many states, if these people establish residency, even illegally, removing them becomes much more complicated. She needs to act fast to protect her property rights. Daniel's college roommate had become a lawyer, and he immediately texted her. Jennifer Wong responded within minutes, offering to come over that afternoon. In the meantime, Lucas said, "We need to secure your valuables and change the locks." We formulated a comprehensive plan. Daniel would stay with me to continue gathering evidence and prevent them from bringing in more belongings. Lucas would go purchase new locks and security cameras. Maria would take what valuables we could discreetly remove to her apartment for safekeeping, including the remaining jewelry we found hidden in Ashley's suitcase. "I feel stronger just having a plan," I admitted. "Last night I was paralyzed, but now you remember who you are," Maria finished for me. "You're Sophia Taylor, the woman who put herself through college, built a successful career, and created a beautiful life. These people have no power over you anymore." As we prepared to implement our plan, I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. "This is Ethan. Can we talk privately? I'm not comfortable with what's happening." I showed the others, and we debated whether it was genuine or another manipulation tactic. Eventually, I agreed to meet Ethan at the coffee shop down the street, with Lucas accompanying me for safety. Ethan was already there when we arrived, looking nervous and out of place. He seemed surprised to see Lucas but didn't object to his presence. "I want no part of this," he said after we sat down. I told them it was wrong from the beginning, but Dad and Diane are desperate, and Ashley just goes along with whatever they say. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked cautiously. "Because I remember how they treated you when we were kids," he admitted, shame evident in his expression. "I was a coward back then, never standing up for you even though I knew it was wrong. I don't want to be that person anymore." He showed me texts on his phone corroborating what we'd already discovered on the iPad, plus additional conversations revealing the extent of their financial deception. They had been lying to everyone, family, friends, creditors, for years, creating an increasingly unstable house of cards that had finally collapsed. "They were counting on your inheritance," Ethan explained. "Dad was furious when your grandmother left everything to you. He felt entitled to at least half, being her son. Did he ever consider that his complete absence from her life might have influenced her decision?" I asked bitterly. Ethan shook his head. "He doesn't see it that way. In his mind, he deserves a share simply because of blood relation." Before we left, Ethan provided one final piece of useful information. Diane had been fired from her previous job for financial impropriety, not hired by a new district as they'd claimed. Their situation was even more desperate than I'd realized. As we walked back to the house, Lucas squeezed my shoulder. "You know what this means, right? This isn't just about helping family in need. This is about taking advantage of you because they've burned every other bridge." I nodded, a new clarity settling over me. "I do have a family," I said firmly. "Just not them." The confrontation that followed my return to the house was explosive. Armed with evidence of their plotting and supported by my friends, I demanded they leave immediately. My father attempted to maintain the fiction of a misunderstanding, while Diane oscillated between tearful pleas and veiled threats about legal complications if they were evicted without proper notice. "This isn't an eviction," Jennifer Wong, Daniel's lawyer friend who had arrived as promised, explained calmly. "You have no legal right to be here. You entered without permission and have no lease or agreement. This is trespassing and potentially breaking and entering." Faced with legal consequences, they reluctantly agreed to leave, but not without a parting shot. "This isn't over," Ashley hissed as they gathered their immediate possessions. "You'll regret turning your back on family when you needed us." "When I needed you?" I repeated incredulously. "I think you have that backwards." They left with minimal belongings, promising to return the next day for the furniture they'd moved in. I changed the locks immediately, with Lucas installing a more secure deadbolt system and Daniel setting up security cameras covering all entrances. I thought the worst was over. I was wrong. The next morning, a moving truck pulled up in front of my house, accompanied not just by my father, Diane, Ashley, and Ethan, but also several relatives I barely recognized, an aunt, two cousins, and Diane's brother. They gathered on my front lawn, creating a spectacle for the neighborhood. When I refused to let them in, they began banging on the doors and windows, shouting that I was heartless, that I was turning my back on family in their time of need. Neighbors peered out of windows, and one elderly man across the street came out to ask if everything was all right. "My stepdaughter is trying to keep us homeless," Diane told him tearfully, loud enough for others to hear. "After everything we did for her growing up." The police arrived, called by Maria, who had been monitoring the security camera feeds remotely, but their response was frustratingly ambivalent. "It's primarily a civil matter, ma'am," the officer explained after listening to both sides. "If they previously had permission to be here and moved belongings in, it gets complicated." "They never had permission," I insisted. "I have evidence they planned this while I was away." Eventually, the officers mediated a compromise. My family could retrieve the furniture they'd brought, supervised by the police, but could not re-enter the house otherwise or take anything that wasn't demonstrably theirs. The humiliating spectacle lasted 2 hours, with neighbors watching as my family removed furniture while loudly lamenting my cruelty. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed, refusing to engage with their theatrics but also refusing to hide. This was my house, and I had nothing to be ashamed of. The physical confrontation was just the beginning. That evening, my phone exploded with calls and messages from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years, some I didn't even remember. They had all heard a version of events that cast me as the villain, the ungrateful daughter who had inherited a fortune and was now leaving her poor father homeless out of spite. The next day, Ashley launched what could only be described as a social media smear campaign. She posted a tearful video describing how I had stolen the family inheritance, refused to help my unemployed father, and callously thrown them out during a financial crisis. She changed the locks while we were at dinner, Ashley claimed falsely in the video. "All our possessions are still inside, including medications and important documents. She won't even let us get our things." The comments filled with outrage from people who knew nothing about the situation, many tagging me directly. Several distant family members shared the video, adding their own embellishments about my character and supposed history of selfishness. My father left voicemails that oscillated between guilt-inducing pleas and subtle threats. "This could all go away if you'd just be reasonable, Sophia," one message ended. "Family problems should stay private, don't you think?" The campaign extended beyond social media. Diane somehow obtained my work email and contacted my supervisor, claiming I was experiencing a mental health crisis and making concerning decisions about family property. Though my boss was understanding when I explained the situation, the invasion of my professional space left me feeling violated all over again. One evening, returning from a stress relief run, I noticed a car slowly driving past my house, the passenger taking photos. Later that night, Ethan texted a warning, "They're talking about adverse possession laws and squatters' rights. Dad thinks if they can get back in and stay for a certain period, you'll have trouble removing them legally." The warning was timely. The following day, I returned home from grocery shopping to find my back door window shattered and Ethan in my kitchen, hurriedly gathering documents from a drawer. "Ethan! What are you doing?" I exclaimed, dropping my bags. He froze, looking guilty and frightened. "Diane sent me to get their birth certificates and social security cards," he admitted. "They said they were here in the drawer." "So you broke into my house?" I was incredulous. "They said I had a right to retrieve their legal documents," he mumbled. I didn't know what else to do. This incident necessitated another police report, but again, the response was frustrating. "Family disputes are complicated," the responding officer sighed. "Especially when property and alleged personal belongings are involved." Jennifer Wong, who had now officially taken me on as a client, explained the reality of the situation. "They're trying to create confusion about who has rights to the property," she said. "Squatters' rights and adverse possession are real concerns. If they manage to establish residency here, even illegally, removing them becomes a formal eviction process that can take months." The stress began affecting every aspect of my life. I had trouble sleeping, jumping at every noise, constantly checking security cameras. My work performance suffered as I struggled to concentrate through the persistent anxiety. Friends took turns staying with me, concerned about both my safety and mental state. Anonymous deliveries began arriving, old family photos with manipulative notes. Remember when we were a real family? Before money and houses mattered more than love? A teddy bear I recognized from childhood, its presence more threatening than nostalgic given the circumstances. 2 weeks into the ordeal, I hit my lowest point. Exhausted from constant vigilance and overwhelmed by the relentless campaign against me, I sat on my kitchen floor at 2 a.m., seriously contemplating whether giving in might be easier than continuing to fight. Am I the heartless one? I whispered to the empty room. Am I being selfish? The next morning, I called Natalie Chen, my former mentor, seeking perspective from someone who knew me professionally but wasn't directly involved in the situation. You know, I went through something similar with my brother, she revealed after listening to my story. He felt entitled to my success because we shared parents. It took me years to understand that loving someone doesn't mean enabling their worst instincts. Her words resonated deeply, reminding me that this pattern of entitlement and manipulation wasn't unique to my family. It was a recognized dynamic that many successful people encountered. That evening, organizing my closet in an attempt to reclaim my space, I discovered a box of my grandmother's belongings I hadn't fully unpacked yet. Inside was her journal, filled with her elegant handwriting. As I flipped through, a passage from her final year caught my eye. Family is a privilege, not a right. Those who treat you as an obligation when they need nothing, have no claim to your abundance when circumstances change. Sophia understands this instinctively, building her chosen family with care and intention. I hope she remembers this wisdom when the vultures inevitably circle. My grandmother had anticipated this scenario. She had known exactly what would happen and had tried to prepare me. Her words, reaching across time and beyond death, gave me renewed strength. I was not wrong to protect what I had built. I was not selfish for maintaining boundaries. And most importantly, I was not alone in this fight. The next morning, I called an emergency strategy session with my support team, Lucas, Maria, Daniel, and Jennifer. We gathered around my dining room table, which was covered with documents, laptops, and half-eaten takeout containers. We need to stop playing defense and start playing offense, Jennifer stated, organizing her legal papers. I've been researching your family's background, and there's a lot more going on than just the current financial crisis. What she revealed was eye-opening. My father and Diane had a history of similar schemes, moving in with elderly relatives during temporary financial difficulties, gradually taking control of their assets, and moving on when resources were depleted. They had left a trail of damaged relationships and financial entanglements across 3 states. They'd been sued twice by Diane's former in-laws for elder financial abuse, Jennifer explained, showing us court documents. Both cases were settled privately, but the pattern is clear. Daniel had been doing his own digital investigation. They've created multiple fundraising campaigns online with different stories about their financial hardship, he reported. Each one contradicts the others about the causes and timeline. Classic scammer approach. Most significantly, Lucas had visited the county records office and discovered something crucial about my grandmother's will. She didn't just leave you everything by default, he explained, showing me the documents. She had her will updated 3 separate times in the 5 years before her death, each time more explicitly excluding your father and including specific language about her intentions for you. The final version included a letter explaining her decision. My son Thomas has repeatedly demonstrated poor financial judgment and an entitlement to resources he has not earned. More concerning is his pattern of allowing his current wife to influence his relationships, including abandoning his responsibilities to his daughter Sophia. I have watched Sophia build herself from nothing, with determination and integrity that Thomas has never shown. My assets are intended for her alone, with full confidence in her judgment. Reading my grandmother's words brought tears to my eyes but also a profound validation. She had seen everything clearly and made deliberate choices to protect me. Her legacy wasn't just financial, it was a final statement of love and faith in me. This letter is gold, Jennifer said. It directly contradicts their narrative that you somehow manipulated your grandmother or that the inheritance was intended for the broader family. Armed with this information, we developed a comprehensive legal protection plan. Jennifer prepared a formal cease and desist letter to be sent to each family member involved in the harassment campaign. She also filed for a temporary restraining order based on the break-in incident and documented pattern of intimidation. Daniel set up additional security measures, cameras with night vision capabilities, motion sensors at all entry points, and an upgraded alarm system that would notify both a security company and the police in case of a breach. I've also secured your digital presence, he added. Changed all your passwords, set up two-factor authentication everywhere, and put a freeze on your credit to prevent them from opening accounts in your name. Maria, whose psychology practice had put her in contact with specialists in family trauma, connected me with Dr. Patel, a therapist experienced in helping clients navigate family estrangement and manipulation. You need emotional support as much as legal protection, Maria insisted. This is triggering deep childhood wounds, and processing that properly will help you stay strong. Lucas, who had become my daily rock throughout the ordeal, focused on practical security. He reinforced door frames, installed window locks, and created a safe room protocol for my bedroom in case of another break-in attempt. And I've got another idea, he said. Maria owns that small rental property across town, right? What if we offer it to them as temporary housing, with a formal, time-limited lease and strict conditions? It removes their claim of being homeless because of you, while also providing a controlled environment with documentation of their behavior. The suggestion was brilliant. Maria's two-bedroom rental had just become vacant, and while smaller than what my family wanted, it would provide legitimate housing that undermined their victim narrative. We'd need to document everything, Jennifer cautioned. Credit check, formal application, security deposit, treat them exactly like any other tenants, with no special treatment. And I'd install cameras there too, Daniel added. With Maria's permission, of course. As our strategy took shape, I began working with Dr. Patel on techniques to remain firm in the face of emotional manipulation. We practiced responses to guilt-inducing statements, identified my emotional triggers, and developed grounding exercises for moments of doubt. Your family knows exactly which buttons to push because they installed those buttons in childhood, Dr. Patel explained. Recognizing when you're being triggered is half the battle. With her guidance, I crafted a careful response to the social media accusations, not a defensive rebuttal that would add fuel to the fire, but a simple, dignified statement. Family relationships are complex and private. I'm saddened that personal matters have been shared publicly in a way that doesn't reflect the complete situation. I continue to wish for resolution that respects everyone's boundaries and well-being. The measured response, devoid of accusations or details, immediately shifted public perception. Neutral acquaintances noted the contrast between Ashley's emotional rants and my restrained comment, creating doubt about their version of events. As days passed, our strategy expanded to include contingency plans for different scenarios. What if they attempted another break-in? What if they approached my neighbors with false stories? What if they escalated to legal action of their own? For each possibility, we developed specific responses and gathered preemptive evidence. Jennifer advised me to document every interaction, save every message, and record every conversation, where legally permitted. Your best protection is a paper trail that shows their patterns clearly, she explained. By the end of the week, we had transformed my reactive fear into proactive strength. The house that had briefly felt like a prison became a fortress. Not just physically secured, but emotionally reclaimed as my own space. The final piece of preparation was mental rehearsal for the confrontation we knew was coming. Jennifer would arrange a meeting at her office, with my family invited to discuss resolution options. I practiced maintaining boundaries, addressing manipulative tactics directly, and staying focused on facts rather than emotions. You're going to feel pulled back into old family dynamics, Dr. Patel warned during our session. They'll try to make you feel like the guilty child again. Remember, you are a successful adult woman with every right to determine who enters your home and your life. The night before the arranged meeting, I sat in my living room with Lucas, Maria, and Daniel, my chosen family who had stood beside me through the entire ordeal. I never thought I had this kind of strength, I admitted. A month ago, I was still hoping for their approval, still vulnerable to their manipulation. You've always had this strength, Lucas said quietly. You just needed the right circumstances to discover it. Maria raised her glass. To boundaries, chosen family, and the power to rewrite our own stories. As we toasted, I felt a calm certainty settle over me. Whatever happened tomorrow, I was no longer the powerless girl desperate for family acceptance. I was Sophia Taylor, standing firmly in my own truth, surrounded by people who loved me for exactly who I was. The meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. at Jennifer's office, neutral territory with security cameras and a receptionist who had been briefed on the situation. I arrived 30 minutes early with my support team. Lucas, Maria, and Daniel waited in an adjacent conference room, ready if needed, while Jennifer sat beside me, a portfolio of evidence organized before us. My father arrived first, looking haggard and older than his years. Diane followed, her usual polished appearance somewhat diminished by obvious stress. Ashley entered with dramatic flair, making a show of dabbing her eyes with a tissue, while Ethan slipped in last, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Thank you for coming, Jennifer began professionally. We're here to discuss the ongoing situation regarding Ms. Taylor's property and the recent incidents of harassment. We're not harassing anyone, Diane interrupted immediately. We're trying to maintain a relationship with an ungrateful daughter who's turned her back on family during a crisis. Rather than engaging with the accusation, Jennifer calmly opened her portfolio. I'd like to establish some facts first. I have documentation here of multiple unauthorized entry attempts at Ms. Taylor's residence, a coordinated social media campaign designed to damage her reputation, contact with her employer that interfered with her professional standing, and evidence of a premeditated plan to move into her home without permission. She placed photos of the broken window, screenshots of Ashley's posts, copies of emails to my workplace, and printouts of their text conversations on the table. These actions constitute harassment, potential breaking and entering, and defamation, Jennifer continued. Before we discuss any resolution, these behaviors must cease immediately. My father shifted uncomfortably. We were desperate, he said, attempting to make eye contact with me. You have to understand, Sophia, we had nowhere to go. That's not entirely accurate, Jennifer replied before I could respond. She produced another document. According to your bank records, subpoenaed as part of a previous legal matter, you received a substantial insurance settlement 8 months ago that would have covered housing costs for at least a year. Those funds were depleted on luxury purchases, including a $15,000 watch and a leased Mercedes. The color drained from my father's face. Diane immediately jumped in, those records are private. You had no right. They were entered as evidence in a public court case regarding your previous landlord's suit against you, Jennifer corrected smoothly. Nothing confidential about public records. The dynamic in the room shifted palpably. My family had clearly expected to control the narrative, to paint themselves as victims of my heartlessness. Instead, they were confronted with documented evidence of their actions and choices. Jennifer methodically continued, presenting evidence of their previous housing schemes with other relatives, documentation of multiple fundraising campaigns with contradictory stories, and finally, my grandmother's explicit letter explaining her decision to leave her estate solely to me. As you can see, Jennifer concluded, Ms. Taylor's grandmother made her intentions extremely clear. There was no misunderstanding or manipulation involved in the inheritance decision. Ashley attempted to regain control, her voice rising dramatically. This is all just legal technicalities. We're talking about family here. Sophia knows in her heart that what she's doing is cruel and selfish. It was time for me to speak. I had rehearsed this moment, prepared for the emotional manipulation, but still felt my heart racing as all eyes turned to me. Family is more than blood relation, I said, my voice steady despite my nerves. Family is consistent support, mutual respect, and genuine care for each other's well-being. For years, you told me I wasn't part of your family. You excluded me, belittled me, and made it clear I wasn't wanted. I looked directly at my father, whose gaze dropped to the table. When I was 16 and you allowed Ashley to tell me I didn't have a real family, you set the terms of our relationship. I accepted those terms and built my life accordingly, creating connections with people who value me. That was years ago, Diane interjected. People say things they don't mean when they're young. It wasn't just words, I replied calmly. It was consistent actions over years. And your recent behavior, planning to move into my home without permission, taking my property, attempting to establish residency against my will, shows nothing has changed. You still don't respect me as a person with valid boundaries and rights. I placed a flash drive on the table. This contains recordings of your planning conversations found on Ashley's iPad, discussions about how to manipulate me into letting you stay, and your explicit acknowledgement that I would never agree if asked directly. It demonstrates clear intent to establish residency in my home through deception. Ashley's face flushed red. You had no right to access my private conversations. An iPad left unlocked in someone else's home during an unauthorized entry is hardly protected by privacy expectations, Jennifer noted dryly. My father suddenly slumped in his chair, the facade of righteous indignation crumbling. We really are in financial trouble, he said quietly. Everything else is true, the bad investments, the foreclosure, the eviction. We didn't know where else to turn. You could have been honest from the beginning, I said. Instead of manufacturing a fake reconciliation to access my resources, you could have simply approached me with the truth and asked for help within boundaries I was comfortable with. Would you have helped? He asked, looking genuinely curious. I don't know, I answered honestly. But your deception eliminated any possibility of finding out. You chose manipulation over vulnerability, control over respect. Jennifer redirected the conversation to concrete next steps. Ms. Taylor has authorized me to offer a compromise solution. She is not obligated to do this, but in the interest of resolving this situation without further escalation, she's willing to assist with temporary housing. She outlined the offer. Maria's rental property would be available to them with a proper 6-month lease, security deposit, and strict conditions regarding property care and conduct. The rent would be reduced by 30% from market rate, but all other standard tenant requirements would apply. This is contingent on several non-negotiable conditions, Jennifer continued. First, all social media posts and public statements about Ms. Taylor must be removed immediately. Second, a legal agreement must be signed acknowledging that Ms. Taylor's home is her sole property with no claim or right of residence by any family members. Third, all direct contact must cease except through myself as intermediary until further notice. The offer hung in the air. It was generous considering the circumstances, but also maintained clear boundaries. It solved their immediate housing crisis without sacrificing my security or autonomy. Diane was the first to respond, her voice bitter. So she gets to play the magnanimous savior while keeping us at arm's length. How convenient. What you're being offered is a legitimate housing solution with favorable terms, Jennifer replied coolly. Most people who attempt unauthorized occupancy of someone else's home receive restraining orders, not reduced rent. My father placed a restraining hand on Diane's arm. We'll take the offer, he said, his voice resigned. We don't have better options. Ashley began to protest, but something in my father's expression silenced her. For perhaps the first time in my memory, he was setting a boundary with his wife and daughter rather than automatically siding with them against me. Ethan, who had remained silent throughout the meeting, finally spoke. I want to apologize, he said, looking directly at me. I knew what they were planning was wrong, but I didn't stop it. I didn't speak up when it mattered, just like when we were kids. The simple acknowledgement of past wrongdoing was unexpectedly moving. It wasn't a complete redemption, but it was the first genuine moment of accountability I'd experienced from any of them. The meeting concluded with Jennifer outlining next steps. Formal paperwork for both the housing arrangement and the no-contact agreement, specific timelines for removing social media posts, and consequences for any violations of the terms. As they left, my father paused at the door. "I failed you," he said simply. "Not just now, but from the beginning. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to hear me say it." Before I could respond, he followed Diane out, leaving me with complicated emotions I knew would take time to process. 2 months later, much had changed. My family had moved into Maria's rental property with surprisingly little drama. The lease agreement's clear consequences for violations, immediate eviction and legal action, had apparently motivated good behavior. Ashley's social media campaign had disappeared overnight, and the extended family's harassment had ceased once the facts became known. Most surprisingly, I had received a handwritten letter from Ethan, delivered through Jennifer rather than sent directly in accordance with our agreement. In it, he expressed genuine remorse for his role as a bystander to the mistreatment I'd experienced, both recently and in childhood. He requested no response and made no demands, simply offering the acknowledgement I had never received from the others. My house felt truly mine again. The security system remained, but no longer out of fear. It was now simply a practical measure that helped me feel confident in my space. I had redecorated the rooms they had invaded, reclaiming them with new paint colors and furniture arrangements that reflected my taste and needs. One evening, I hosted a dinner party for Lucas, Maria, Daniel, Natalie, Jennifer, and Dr. Patel, the circle of support that had carried me through the crisis. As we gathered around my dining table, sharing food and laughter, I realized something profound had shifted within me. The wound of family rejection that had ached for so many years had finally begun to heal, not because I had received the acceptance I once craved, but because I no longer needed it. After dinner, I brought out my grandmother's jewelry collection, now safely returned and secured. I had decided to repurpose some pieces, creating new settings that honored their history while transforming them into something uniquely mine. "I'm having the sapphire from her ring reset into a pendant," I explained, showing them the design. "And I've had copies made of the pearl necklace, one for each of you. You're the family I've chosen, the people who showed up when it mattered most." As we raised our glasses in a toast, I felt the final pieces of my story falling into place. The professional success I had worked so hard for continued to flourish. I had received a promotion at work for a project I had somehow managed to complete despite the chaos in my personal life. I had even begun volunteer work with a nonprofit that helped young adults aging out of foster care navigate independence, finding healing in helping others who understood family complexity. The family photos that had been replaced with my stepfamily's images now held new pictures, moments with friends who had become family, celebrations of milestones we had shared, evidence of the connections I had built through choice rather than obligation. "They said I didn't have a family," I told my friends as we settled in the living room with dessert. "They were right, I have something much better. I have people who love me by choice, not by accident of birth. And that has made all the difference." What's your experience with family boundaries? Have you ever had to make difficult decisions about who belongs in your life? Comment below with your thoughts, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to hear more stories about standing up for yourself and creating the life you deserve. Thank you for listening to my journey. May you find the strength to create healthy boundaries in your own relationships and recognize the true meaning of family in your life.